Hello, welcome. Thank you for being here. In this video, I wanted to talk a bit about the sort of general risk to reward ratio of exercise and physical activity. I'll probably title this Pickleball Dangerous or something like that because the inspiration for me sitting down here and making this video is hearing a number of different kinds of healthcare professionals of different professions recommend that people avoid pickleball just in general, saying it's dangerous, it's not worth it, you're going to get hurt, all this sort of stuff. And I think that serves to do much more harm than good. So, like I said, pickleball is going to be kind of the example that I'm going to use to sort of illustrate the points I have here today because I think there's a lot of aspects of it that make it a good example. But the sort of worldview regarding risk to reward of exercise and physical activity in general can really be applied to anything else you want to do. So, broadly speaking, the risk of any exercise or activity or anything like that is usually measured in terms of the number of injuries that occur per 1,000 participation hours. So, for instance, CrossFit and powerlifting, as just general disciplines, have something like a 1 to 4, or have a rate of injury of 1 to 4 injuries that occur per 1,000 participation hours. For other field and court sports, the data is rather messy, to say the least. It depends greatly on the volume of play, of the level of play, like whether you're talking about amateur or professional, or if you're talking about, let's say, training or a game. Typically, I think basketball, if the numbers in my head are correct, something like 8 to 24 injuries per 1,000 participation hours is the sort of general, somewhere in that range. I might be off a little bit. There's also a number of papers that I have in my head that I'm basing these numbers off of that I will link down below just so you know, so you can fact check me. And to be clear, these injuries that occur per 1,000 participation hours don't only include severe life-changing type of injuries. They include any type of adverse effect or injury. So it could be a completely torn Achilles tendon, or it could just be a very mild ankle sprain that'll be better in a couple of days. So in other words, let's assume that you had some sport that had an injury rate of 5 injuries that occur per 1,000 participation hours. And let's just say in this example that things worked out perfectly as to where every time that 1,000 number was hit, 5 injuries occurred. So let's say you had group of people that participated in that sport for 1,000 cumulative hours across all the people. You would expect 5 injuries to occur. If that increased to 2,000 hours, you would expect 10 injuries to occur, and so forth. Pickleball is a relatively novel sort of phenomenon in the country, at least in the United States, at least. And so just by way of the unit of measurement for injury rates, if the number of participation hours increases, which it certainly has in the case of pickleball, the number of injuries that occur as a result of pickleball will subsequently increase. And I think what has tended to happen over the past couple of years is that because of that reason that I just stated, the number of injuries as a result of pickleball has increased. Therefore, healthcare providers who treat those sort of conditions see an increase in prevalence of injuries from pickleball, and then therefore they see it as more dangerous and doing a great deal of harm. But there's a couple problems with that. So one, there's this idea of selection bias, and that is that a given selected sample of people may not be perfectly representative of the population overall. So for instance, an orthopedic doctor who only sees orthopedic conditions, if he starts seeing more injuries as a result of pickleball, he might think that's perfectly representative of the number of people who play pickleball, that there's this huge number of injuries occurring. But, so let's go back to that example and just say, for example's sake, that the injury rate was 5 injuries per 1,000 participation hours. If participation hours increase, therefore injuries increase, pickleball is not becoming more dangerous. It's just being played more. And, by way of probability, injury rates also increase. Not injury rates, actually. I want to correct myself before I move on. Injury absolute numbers increase. Another thing that it ignores is the wide array of positive health benefits and quality of life benefits that come from something like pickleball. So this is one of the reasons why I wanted to use pickleball as my example for this video. So pickleball has this reputation as being an old person sport. Obviously a lot of young people play it too, but it does have that stereotype nonetheless. With age, cardiovascular fitness decreases, physical activity, no matter which way you measure it, whether it's step count or whatever else, tends to decrease. Isolation tends to decrease, and socialization decreases, as well as coordination, such as hand-eye coordination, tends to decrease. Pickleball addresses all of those. It's a very social game. It requires high levels of physical activity, usually gets your heart rate elevated for a prolonged period of time, requires movement in multiple planes of motion, requires good hand-eye coordination, all the stuff. And look, I can go on and on why that's healthy, but I think it's fair enough to just leave that as it is for right now. Another thing that that sort of, absolutist claim that pickleball is dangerous and making that recommendation fails or fails to acknowledge is that injury risk is somewhat modifiable. Now, look, there's always a chance that you trip over a rock and you roll your ankle and, whatever. Nevertheless, pickleball is not inherently dangerous. Something that might be somewhat risky is being sedentary for 15 years, picking up pickleball, realizing it's fun, and then playing 4 hours straight and then wondering why your knee hurts. It's not the pickleball in that case, it's the load management that was the problem there, which that obviously I say is kind of an exaggerated example, but that's sort of thing that, big jump from sedentarianism to super high levels of physical activity by way of pickleball isn't totally uncommon when you talk to enough people. With that example, let's contrast that with someone who, maybe was sedentary for 10 to 15 years prior. Let's say they began some type of strength training and aerobic training, and then when they began pickleball, they didn't start with 4 hours straight. They started with like 1 hour. And over time, as their fitness and their tolerance to playing improved, so did their playing volume. Because look, the big things you're able to modify is the volume of pickleball. Let's just stay on this pickleball topic for the sake of the example. The volume of pickleball that you play, as well as the preparedness, how prepared you are going into playing. There certainly are non-modifiable risk factors for injury, like if there happens to be a little bit of water or a rock that you trip over on the pickleball court, as well as age. It's not unfair to say that a young person might be more resilient than an older person, but it doesn't discount the fact that you have the opportunity to prepare and to manage your playing volume. So with all of that said, here's sort of the crux of my point and the overarching theme of this video. Increasing physical activity, fitness, and socialization are arguably some of the most health promoting things that you can do, especially as you age. There's always going to be a non-zero risk of injury, but that's modifiable and usually not as high of a risk as people think. That said, the risk to reward ratio of exercise of something like pickleball is so in favor of pickleball that, in my view, it does significantly more harm to just flat out absolutely say you should not play pickleball. But certainly there are cases where someone just shouldn't, if they're post-op or whatever. To sort of instill this sort of kinesiophobia or this fear of movement can doom a person to a decline of function and quality of life and health at large. So I would urge you, whether it's pickleball or any other form of activity, because again, this sort of view of the risk to reward ratio of sports and exercise and all the things of the like can be said to apply to anything else. I would urge you to not have these thoughts yourself, nor to try to instill them in others, because I do think it is the path of more harm than good. So with that said, I'm going to end this video here. If you agree or disagree or have anything else you want to say, anything you want to add, comment below, and I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate you hanging out here with me and watching, and I will speak to you soon.